I just want to be clear, when she says take a stand, she literally reversed the few good policy proposals she had. She reversed all of them. So that's what we're talking. When she says stand your ground and fight, she reversed her, whatever the hell she said she stood for, which I'm not even sure she actually believed it then. She reversed herself very quickly. Hey, it's Jordan. I am in Flint, Michigan, East Palestine, Ohio, Tumwa, Iowa. Please support the only independent outlet on the ground covering what the corporate media covers up. I tweeted this 2-3 weeks ago. Kamala Harris is literally running, literally all caps, Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign. Only she's doing it further to the right because she's going around politically prostituting herself with Liz Cheney, of all people. At least Hillary Clinton didn't do that. She offered some kind of incremental neoliberal tax credits and things like that, but zero bold policy. I remember we did our on the ground reporting trip. We were driving around on the swing states. I kept seeing billboards. Kamala Harris supports the raising the minimum wage. I said, to what? She ended up running the same campaign of Hillary, which is Trump's a fascist, stop the bad man, and here's some, kind of tax credits and crumbs. And by the exit polls, I mean, I tweeted it out earlier. It's not a shocker. 75% of voters said inflation had either moderately or severely harmed them.
Yeah.
67% said they're worse off than they were economically. Well, if you don't have a specific plan, anything bold to counteract that, and frankly, I think Biden hurt her because there are things Biden could have done, Zaina, to lower prices that he refused to do.
I watched CNN, so I was up way too late. This was like 4 a.m. They were still going. And one of the panelists said that we're going to hear this mythology essentially from, she said, what we're going to hear is we're going to hear that it was the economy, and we're going to hear that if Kamala had run to the left, like had more of a Bernie Sanders type platform, similar to what she had in 2019, that she would have done far better. And she said, I don't buy that. She said she just wasn't war ready.
Oh, God.
That was her whole analysis, was she just wasn't war ready. And that was it. That's all she said. So, but I agree with you that when you look at this race, Harris didn't even come out with a platform until she was already almost 60, 75 days in.
To the volunteers who gave so much of themselves, to the poll workers and the local election officials, I thank you. I thank you all.
I just want to say real quick, and this is not because I love Harris, but we should just say it. Trump beat Hillary Clinton. She came out in less than 24 hours and conceded the election. Trump beat Kamala Harris. She's out within less than 24 hours. She conceded the election. I don't think we should normalize the fact that the president-elect still hasn't conceded that he lost. And I mean, the only reason we're not having riots and more violence is because he won. So right. we shouldn't just pigeonhole and memory hole that. That's not democratic, even though we do not have a democracy.
I will never give up the fight for a future where Americans can pursue their dreams, ambitions, and aspirations, where the women of America have the freedom to make decisions about their own body and not have their government telling them what to do.
I'd love to ask you, because obviously I don't have the parts, what I always found very interesting. Of course, I understand women who would vote for her on the abortion issue. I get it. But she never expressed how she was actually going to restore Roe v. Wade. She said, I'm for removing the filibuster, but Biden said he was for a $15 minimum. Like, she never actually said, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z to get Roe v. Wade restored. And I asked women in my life, like, is it enough that she shares your values? Because she's not actually communicating how she's going to do it, or if she's going to fight to do it. I don't know what your thoughts on that are.
I feel like it's that carrot that the Democratic Party dangles out in front of us every election cycle. Since even before the reversal of Roe v. Wade, they told us they were going to codify it. right? And so we've been having this carrot dangled out, and only 8% of the country are support restrictive abortion laws. Only 8%. And so
Right.
it's highly unpopular, restrictive abortion laws. But the reason that I think the huge piece that's missing here is that 65% of the races were uncontested. And I talked to you earlier about this. So, and a lot of those states where the draconian anti-LGBT laws are happening, um, the anti-choice laws are happening, is states that the Democratic Party abandoned when they abandoned the 50-state strategy. And this election, they left more than half the country uncontested, meaning that the only choice on the ballot for people in those states for most of their state house seats was Republican.
For the sake of freedom and justice and the future that we all know we can build together. Look, many of you know I
Obama
started
hand
out as a
gestures
prosecutor,
down.
and throughout my career, I saw people at some of the worst times in their lives. People who had suffered great harm and great pain, and yet found within themselves the strength and the courage and the resolve to take the stand, to take a stand.
I just want to be clear, when she says take a stand, she literally reversed the few good policy proposals she had. She reversed all of them.
Yeah.
Literally, when she was running in 2019, first of all, she signed on to Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All 5 minutes before she ran for president. Then she launched her campaign on Medicare for All. But then when the donors and the media pressured her, she literally reversed herself on Medicare for All within 48 hours.
Yeah, it was staggering.
So that's what we're talking. When she says stand your ground and fight, she reversed her whatever the hell she said she stood for, which I'm not even sure she actually believed it then. She reversed herself very quickly. She did only have 100 days to run the campaign. But I should also say, she had more money from wealthy donors than any candidate in the history of America. They're reporting, Zaina, that between Harris and Trump, $10 billion was spent.
Yes.
Which is obscene. So she had the money, which I don't think you need the corporate money to compete, but that's a different story. The bottom line is, in my view, based on the exit polls, and I've already told you the highlights, 75% of Americans who voted said inflation had either severely or moderately hurt them. 67% of Americans said they were worse off economically than 4 years ago. I don't think it's a small thing, and these might not be the final numbers, but 3% less age 18 to 29 voted. So that's Gen Z and some of the millennials, a 3% drop in youth turnout, and Harris was down 5% compared to Biden among 18 to 29. I would cite Gaza for that.
Yeah.
I don't think Gaza was the defining reason she lost. I certainly don't think it helped. I should also say Donald Trump, who reportedly has told Benjamin Netanyahu, do whatever you need to do. He won Dearborn, Michigan. He got 42% of the vote in Dearborn, Michigan. And I'm not going to second guess people who are in mourning and in terror, Arab Americans living in Dearborn. I understand a protest vote because Biden and Harris are currently providing the check. But when I hear her speak, somebody said it in the chat, Zaina, it's just a platitude word salad.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, what was she offering other than fascist? I'll try to meet Republicans where they are. And economically, here's some tax credits.
That was it. She ran on deregulation, also of the housing market. She kind of ran on. Yimbies were very excited for a moment, but we're talking about the corporate captured ones. And so that was actually a that was a hit to her campaign, because what she was suggesting, she didn't have any model for to prevent gentrification. So people in the cities that have been impacted by that type of gentrification, that was a huge there was a lot of clapback that wasn't really covered by mainstream media on that particular policy when she came out with it. So that is so much money spent on a campaign that it really is staggering. Spent on campaigns. We're like,
They say we could.
records out of the
They
water.
say we could end homelessness for 20 billion, and 10 billion was spent on this presidential campaign.
Yeah, we're in a new era that's very similar to post-industrial age. We're basically living in 1926 right now, right before the Great Depression. And we have our modern Vanderbilts, right? We've got the Jeff Bezos and the Elon Musks, and it's very similar. We've got our own Carnegies now. But and those people are pouring into the elections, very similar. History doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. And I think we're seeing that because we saw a lot being pulled into elections way back then for Coolidge and others. I think that we're seeing similar parallels. But for Kamala, I just don't think she reached people. She didn't give us anything. If you're going to come out of it's like I said earlier, if you're going to come out of the gate, you've only got 100 days. You should bust out with some bold policy immediately, don't you think?
When's the last time any anchor on CNN or MSNBC had to fill up their gas tank half full because they couldn't afford to fill it up full? The people, the gatekeepers, Zaina, that provide the information, they're all disconnected from actually the people they're supposed to be providing the information to. They have absolutely no idea. And frankly, I don't think Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski give a fuck, really, about that lived economy. Because to them, it's all about the horse race and politics and who's up and who's down and their friends. But the reality is the economy in America hasn't been good really since the 1960s. And what I mean by the economy is actual egalitarianism, economic equality.
Yeah, and I think our chat is capturing this really well, because they're saying, it was about vibes, it was about joy, it was about rhetoric. The Democratic Party, the Dems have focused and liberals have focused so hard on rhetoric and feels, so hard on I hate to use the word identity politics because I don't believe that, because I do believe that racism exists. I do believe that there are real systemic issues, but they don't talk about the systemic issues. They focus on rhetoric. They build everything off of three different things: assumption of what the voting demographic and the people are when they're so out of touch, like you said, they don't even care. They're in another universe than we are. They really are. They live in a completely different universe than the everyday working person. I mean, these are people that can get nannies and that, have their landscaped and have, 14-room houses and stuff. These are people that are so detached from, they don't even buy their own groceries most of the time. So they don't know anything about what it's like to live a day-to-day life. There's an assumption of what people want that liberals arrogantly make. They put us all, like you said earlier, into a monolith. All Muslims think the same. All Latin people think the same. All, poor people in Appalachia are all just toothless rednecks, sitting on their front porch spitting backer. You know what I mean? And then they tokenize us with rhetoric. And that's it.
The Democratic Party, they had a fundamental choice to make after 2016 when Hillary lost. They chose to blame Russia and move to the right. They didn't have to move. They didn't have to make a choice after 2020 because Biden won, and they were able to put basically a Band-Aid on the gaping gunshot wound because the neoliberal bubble was beginning to pop. And now they have a fundamental choice to make. It's the donors and the corruption and keeping the system intact, which is we're going to continue to offer neoliberal crumbs because we have to keep this corrupt system in place, which is getting money from Wall Street. And by the way, we're talking both parties. Trump got a ton of money from special interests too. Trump is not self-funded. He is just as corrupt as Harris. But they could either keep the status quo because they think the only way we could compete is with billionaire money, or they could recognize, well, maybe the country has changed. Maybe people are tired of neoliberalism, tax credits, public-private partnerships. Maybe people, as I showed, I went into a National Action Network rally. That's Al Sharpton's group. Not exactly leftists. And I was interviewing several black women, maybe in their 60s. I didn't speak with them before. I assumed they were for Harris. They both told me they were considering Trump. These are lifelong hardcore Democrats. Knocked on the doors for Democrats. Phone bank for Democrats. Gave their little, the little money they had to Democrats. Bought vote blue no matter who. Not necessarily because they like Trump and not because they were against Harris. They were disgusted by the local and state Democratic Party. They were fed up with the Democratic Party. They were fed up with the gentrification. They were fed up with the broken promises. They were fed up with the same exact record spinning every election. This is the most important election of our lifetime. Eat your vegetables because they're worse than us. Colin, if you could play those. Psychologically, you've probably been canvassing and busting your butt for the last 20, 30 years for Democrats.
Yes.
So it must be kind of like...
It's so disappointing. It's like, wow, we've been floating out there for somebody just to find out all these details and information that we didn't have at hand before. And so now that we had this information, you got to stand back and say, wow, our community is not growing, it's not surviving, it's not thriving, it's swindling, it's impoverished, it's crime-ridden, it's not represented.
Everywhere I go, whether it's Detroit, Flint, Cleveland, all these cities, the same pattern is there's like 5 to 10 blocks that are amazing and beautiful. Bars, restaurants, cultural centers, sporting stadiums. And then you drive like 10 minutes down the road and it looks like a third world country in some parts.
You can go to Grosse Pointe. I live 2 blocks from Grosse Pointe. On the opposite side of the street, it's very nice. You look on my side of the street, you see deers and stuff that aren't even supposed to be here. No houses, vegetation that done dwindled away. It's horrible.
Vacant land and war-torn zones.
Right. Because and Grosse Pointe is one of our very exclusive neighborhoods, And I see the work that they do in Grosse Pointe. When our basement's flooded. I mean, flooded and flooded. You know what Grosse Pointe did? They done built them a whole new station in a matter of a year.
Well, did you know that after the Flint water disaster went national, the governor, Snyder at the time, he preemptively replaced all of the lead pipes in Ann Arbor.
Of course.
They didn't have a problem.
Right.
But he took out the pipes. Flint, 10 years later, they still had it. I mean, and people were getting on me, Jordan, you're only looking for people to shit on the Democratic Party. I don't do pre-interviews. I thought they were for Harris. I thought they were for Harris. Do you know how many people I met, black men in Detroit, in Milwaukee, that they either told me they were going to vote for Trump or they were going to leave it blank? So it's not just that people are fed up with or were against Harris. They're fed up with the Democratic Party. And the common pattern, Zaina, and I'm sure you're seeing it where you are too, we just live in a collective tale of two cities. American cities and communities, literally local governments, are selling the government to real estate developers.
Different forms of gentrification happening. Some of them are racially targeted. A lot of them are targeting poor areas. You have flight into areas like folks are selling their homes for high dollar in places like that where you can't afford to live in these places. So I don't blame them, but in places like Connecticut and stuff like that, you can sell your homes for $3 million and then move to a place, let's say Somerset, Kentucky. You can buy a beautiful home on the lake for $500,000, but the people here, that $500,000, that's wealthy here. So there's such a massive disparity between the income gaps in the country that it's creating a flood into poor areas where the homes are being bought out, but the pay isn't going up for the people there. And then homes are being bought. And then on top of that, with immigration and Biden, that was a huge issue because in my area, for instance, now there's a 5-year waiting list on public housing, but Biden didn't expand the public housing program because there's caps on how much public housing can be built. So in some of these places, there's a wait now because Biden prioritized migrants, which I'm not again. I am pro-immigration. I was a founder of Abolish ICE. You know this, Jordan. I've been fighting this fight for years. But the problem is that migrants came into these communities and the infrastructure wasn't built for that. And so what it did is he placed a lot of these migrants in poor communities, didn't give the resources for the poor communities to handle the influx of the population. And so then Trump used that grievance then to spread hostility instead of course, because Republicans don't ever talk about things authentically as they are. But the problem is the distribution of aid for those regions rather than the migrants themselves. The migrants aren't the problem. The problem was if you send a whole bunch of people into a place like Laurel County, which is where I live in Kentucky, and you bring in 150 migrant families into the homes here, the government housing here, it pushes it up to a 5-year waiting list. And then the people here are like, we can't get housing either. And then it creates this rift, right, between poor people. And I think people are tired of that. They just want help.